this is Matt Harris with the Magento Association Podcast. And today we are talking with Matt Parkinson from Gene Agency in the UK. Welcome, Matt.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Matt. Lovely to be here.
So, Matt, we were able to chat a little bit before we got started on this. Tell me a little bit about the Gene Agency and your background with Magento.
Okay. So Gene Commerce, full name, based in the UK. We've been in the Magento space for about 14 years. Personally, I've been in the Magento space since it really kicked off. So that's getting on for sort of 17 years now, I guess. And we've seen that entire journey from ownership of Varian through to eBay, through to private equity, most recently Adobe. As an agency, we're focused on doing the sort of complex integrations, the interesting differentiation of the platform, which is why we love the sort of the open source nature. Had the opportunity to build not only just client and retail merchant websites, but also products that we've taken to market over that period as well. So Magento has been really good to us. We've built the whole business around it. And we've seen, like I said, that history over for many, many years.
And how do you feel like Magento is changing in the last few years? What do you see are some of the highlights, maybe some of the some things you maybe feel we could move along a little quicker? Some
always move quicker. Yeah,
right.
Always move quicker. I think it's a lot's changed in the last couple of years, let alone the last 10 or 15. Both in terms of the sector, the industry of e-commerce as a whole, but also the platforms. Magento had such a dominant hold for many, many years. It was really the go-to platform, early days OS commerce.
Mm-hmm.
And it managed to grab such a market share across the whole spectrum of retailers, from startup mom and pop shops up to multinational enterprise businesses. And I think that's just the power of obviously the open source nature. People could do whatever they wanted of it. We did, as a community, as an ecosystem, I think we did suffer a little bit along that journey because of the changing ownership stakeholders. And I think we've never really had consistency in terms of feature roadmap or development. We all lost time, money, friends when Magento 2 came out. We all took a bit of a haircut on that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
It seemingly never really recovered from that. It did a lot of damage in terms of reputation. And I think since then it's been the job of the community and the agencies really to shore up that platform.
Yeah.
Ironically, now it's a really solid, it's incredibly solid platform. A lot of the issues that are still being pointed out by other platforms have long gone, but there's still been absence of any ambitious, aggressive, innovative roadmap to bring the platform along with the changing sort of tech industry.
Yeah. I also feel like there's the trade-offs with the Adobe ownership. That's my personal perspective, is that one of the advantages is that you have this enterprise corporation that's going after enterprise clients and showcasing that Magento can definitely meet the needs of large enterprise builds. Magento being the engine that drives Adobe Commerce, in case anyone doesn't know. So that gives credibility to the open source platform. At the same time, the open source platform, in an ideal state, is bringing requests from the community at large, all the thousands of merchants, for functionality that they need. And those can get filtered in and built very quickly, where it's really hard to do that in a closed system, in a SaaS system. So, you kind of have these two components that make it, I think, a very stable position, stable in enterprise, stable in open source. Sometimes the trade-offs are the roadmap becomes fuzzy because you have these two entities, right, that are working on it. And then along comes SaaS that challenges this model, saying, no, it should be multi-tenant. We should all just put it on one thing. Let's not overcomplicate this. And I think a lot of us agency people are like, hold on, it is complicated. Like there is complicated builds that we need to customize out there. So just wondering, like, what's your take on that whole,
recent announcement?
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into that too. Yeah.
Let's get into it. It's caused some noise, some conversation. I think it's, I don't envy the decisions that Adobe have had to make, because I think it's an impossible task to solve for the problems you explained. And I think this is potentially one of the challenges some of the other platforms. The little green bag from Canada, trying to be all things to all people.
Mm-hmm.
Have a platform that satisfies, the one mom and pop shop up to complex B2B systems. It's an argument as old as time, isn't it? You've got to pick your lane, you've got to pick your ICP, and I think it's impossible to accommodate that entire reach. And I think with Adobe buying the open source platform, I think they struggle to know how to deal with the community.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, we're quite noisy, quite demanding, quite opinionated. And that didn't necessarily sit with a corporate strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think their response to the very real problems with the platform, which is total cost of ownership, time to market, speed and performance, front-end framework. There's probably a dozen that are really notable that the other platforms use to sell against. Adobe's come out and said, we can solve this by building out a SaaS solution. We can, and also when we look at the market trends, what platforms are doing well, Shopify's, BigCommerce, whatever, they're all SaaS. So therefore we need to be in that space. So I think I understand that decision, why they've done it. I think they're doing it at the risk of undermining what has made the platform so successful over those many years, which is the pure open source nature that people like you and I can effectively build whatever we want. We have control. We have transparency and trust in the platform. We have complete flexibility and customization, data controls, all that stuff that's associated with open source. I think we lose a little bit of that by going down to SaaS. I'm trying to be a bit more nuanced around it, and I'm like, okay, well, with the same underlying code base, a merchant has a menu option now which route they want to go do that suits their business needs. So on one hand, they can go with a pure open source premium product. They can go with the Adobe Commerce version of that. So they have some comfort that it's underwritten or backed by the big firm. But in that lane, they can choose on-prem or they can go with the cloud offering. Or at the other extreme, if the business is looking for a pure SaaS offering, they can go down that route. So with the same sort of code base that we understand, then there are various lanes. And I think if it's approached in that manner, no other tech firm has that variety that you can satisfy all those different business requirements.
I think the idea for, people in the Magento Association is all, okay, Adobe decided to build the SaaS platform and they put a lot of time and resources into it, from my understanding. But that meant at the expense of not doing other things, right? So they decided to go down this path versus maybe doing some other things. And I think the association probably would have been like, we'd rather you have done some other things. Yeah. But the other thing, and I wanted to make sure that everyone's clear on this, and this is what I've been told, is that, there's Adobe Commerce Cloud, and then there's Adobe Commerce On-Prem, and then there's Adobe Commerce as a cloud service or SaaS, right? And then there's Magento open source. So essentially there's 4 versions. My understanding is that Adobe Commerce On-Prem is not going away.
That is correct. Although I did encourage sort of recalibration of the messaging out there, because that platform will continue for the foreseeable future. And being a cynical Brit as I am, that term suddenly says to me, that's end of life.
Yeah.
So I advocated and encouraged, a commitment to continuing investment in it. Because otherwise, if you don't, then, SaaS is a new product. And unless businesses want to be early adopters, and they also got to, and they know this, and they're putting a lot of effort into it. There is an uphill struggle to re-engineer all of those third-party integrations, modules, extensions that make the platform powerful into this new world, into this new app builder, low-code layer. That doesn't happen overnight.
No.
So if you're looking at platforming now, the reason I like the idea, and this is how we advocate it for our clients, is that you have those menu options, is that you have a future pathway. So if you invest into the platform, depending on how your business grows and where it is in 2-3 years time, you have routes to go rather than having to revisit a replatforming. If you outgrow it.
That's a great point, actually, because maybe a company looking to replatform, I'm just repeating what you're saying, might say, well, we're not sure about SaaS yet, but we like that it could be an option in 3 years, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would also wager that there's a lot of big companies, large enterprises using on-prem that are going to be like, no, you're not taking it away from us. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, we've invested too much. We have it on our own frameworks. Like, we're not putting this on an Adobe Cloud environment for your sake.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think there's, there was obviously a massive surge towards those platforms, those SaaS platforms, and it continues. The momentum there. It feels very, very safe, very easy. But there is a swing away from it.
Yeah.
You lose control, you lose ownership. You're at the behest of changes. We talked about the growing costs of not having control ownership of all the apps that build up your ecosystem. It's incredibly risky profile to put your business. If you're just a pure play, just want to shift boxes, and you're not interested in building IP into your business, then fine, you can offshore that or hand it off. But if you are fundamentally, you're trying to differentiate your business and build IP into that organization, you can't do that as effectively on a SaaS platform as you can controlling your data.
Yeah.
Now, we've worked with a healthcare brand for about 6-7 years ago on Adobe Commerce, and they switched 5 years ago to be a subscription first business. They're into adult incontinence products. Not very glamorous, but unfortunately a massively growing market. But I know a lot about flow rates now. Stuff I didn't need to.
Yeah, not digital flow rates either.
Indeed, stuff I didn't need to know. But they're so focused. They're so focused on a differentiation and building features and tech to serve their customers, because it's a very sensitive topic. They want to be able to interact with the brand in a particular way. They're just going with a SaaS product and taking a subscription product service off the shelf. You would have to fit your business to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the technology dictating to you how you run your business.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for the last few years, they've said, we need to solve that problem. This is the feedback. How do we do that? And suddenly we can build it. And I have to say, they've built tremendous technology that's transformed their business every year, double-digit growth by building out custom churn rate optimization, lifetime value, being able to say your subscription coming in dispatched in 2 days. Do you want to add anything to it because you get free delivery anyway? Really nice features that you would be at the behest of a SaaS platform. And that's a prime example of building that intrinsic IP into the business.
Yeah. I think one of the, like, if we're going to talk about SaaS versus open source, I think one of the big benefits of SaaS is that you can get up and running fast. And I think during COVID, the value of SaaS just really skyrocketed because everyone was panicking and they're like, okay, let's get up and running quickly. No one at that point was doing a 5-year total cost of ownership assessment. They weren't doing a business assessment. Can this conform to our business requirements instead of like, let's just get something up quickly. I think the dust is starting to settle on that. And people are like thinking, wait a minute, how much, what's the take rate of this platform? And yet it can't do X, Y, and Z, or we're struggling to get it to do X, Y, and Z. And we don't have our own business data, our own customer data on our own servers that we can have open access to. I mean, I'm sure you can get all that off, but the point is like, you could do other integrations with AI coming in. I think the fact that you want to keep that stuff on your own servers private, I think makes a ton of sense. Plus in regulated industries, it might be a requirement. So there's areas where SaaS falls short. It's not to say SaaS isn't great. It's great for a lot of companies. Like if there, I could think of a dozen businesses. If I went into, became a merchant in those industries, I'd be like, yeah, Shopify, no doubt. But it's not the end all be all. Let's just say SaaS, not to throw, right. But you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying that I feel like the value of open source is starting to ascend now, where it was kind of getting beat up in the marketplace for a good 3 or 4 years. I think people are starting to kind of come around on it again. I don't know what your thoughts are.
It's very easy. Just you get swept up into the latest and greatest hype. There was 2 years where the whole talk around Mac kind of took everyone down a particular route until reality set in. Yeah. And again, sort of total cost of ownership and, real world scenarios. So I think you're right. I think, the SaaS model, I always say Shopify is, it's a phenomenal platform. It allows you to do the easy stuff really easily. It makes the hard stuff really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
And I think like you, we can very quickly assess a business and make recommendations of where they probably sit within a platform. We have a framework that we use. We call it the EVO model, which is sort of the e-commerce evolutionary model. It's not. It's based around what your business requirements are and what sort of e-commerce operation fits those requirements. And it kind of puts you in levels, level 1 to level 5. Level 1 being, the basic turnkey solution that suits your business. Level 5 being uber differentiation, customer loyalty, doing stuff that, delights customers out of the norm. But you've got to pick a lane and you go, well, that's what we need to do as a business and we need to do it really well. What platform satisfies us in that world? So it's very easy to go, yeah, you're a Magento customer, you're a Shopify customer. The difficulty is not everyone in the industry is like you or I. They're very tribal. And often the answer is platform first, then what do you want to do for your business?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is doing a disservice to a lot of, dare I say, consultants out there or agencies that are acting in self-interest rather than actually giving true advice if we've had a couple of clients move to Shopify, they were probably right. They were probably the right fit for that if they'd started off in that vein. But they were under the illusion that it'd be a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time to spin up. And that didn't pan out as reality. No one's honest enough to go, yeah, you're going to have 20 apps to pimp up your platform.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have these workarounds off it. So it's about being open and honest and transparent around where the problems lie, and making sure that the platform actually does try and solve those issues for you.
Yeah. I think part of the problem is some agencies are selling solutions rather than solving problems. And, problems, you have to listen and figure out the full problem. That's where the assessment comes into. But if you already know the solution before you start the conversation, then you're not really helping much, right?
No, exactly. And I think that will come full circle.
Yeah.
And the open source, as we spoke previously, it's not going away. That's here to stay. Huge mainframes, infrastructure, businesses are built on it because of that openness, that trust. Yeah. As we move into this AI world where everything is just black box by 4 organizations, then there will be a pushback, I think, for more control, more transparency, more trust.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the, we touched on this before we talked before we started the podcast. I think there's inherent value in open source that a lot of people sometimes forget, or, it doesn't really get brought up, but it's hard to kill, and sometimes like what you want is something that's got longevity. If you're looking at making an investment, you want to know that this tool, I've seen, I've been in the industry for 30 years. I've seen abandonment on dozens and dozens of platforms. So you're not given the option to replatform. And I think what we've seen, with open source is that there's tons of examples of open source systems that are still running. And if there's a corporation that's going to either, live or die on a closed system, what happens if they die? As a merchant, you're forced to make a pivot. Whereas, and I love having Adobe as a kind of part of the ecosystem, but let's be frank, if they died, I think Magento would survive, right?
I think you're right.
So there's another reason, not that anyone wants Adobe to die at any stretch. I think they're going to be, thriving for years to come. And I think the Adobe Enterprise version of the platform is great. I'm a practitioner of it myself. We put people on it all the time. So,
I mean, you're absolutely. Why has that platform endured, and why do people still bash it? It's because of the power of that community, ecosystem. It's a living thing, beast, and there's a lot of love for it. And actually, it did lose its way a little bit. There was felt that the Magento open source platform was out in the wilderness a little bit. There have been notable initiatives over the last few years that have reignited that enthusiasm and spark. Most notably, you talked about it, most notably with William and Hoover, what they've done in solving that front end challenge has breathed all sorts of new life and stopped the decline, and shown that with the right focus, skills and approach, an incredibly performant, versatile, flexible platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and the ecosystems kind of solves problems organically. There's no, executive in a boardroom somewhere dictating this is what you're all going to do. Yeah. Like if the market, the community decides this is something we need, the community just does it, which is incredibly powerful.
I mean, it's a double-edged sword a little bit, because that was what some of the problems Magento had, or the criticism against it was that you could very easily spin up a site and install all sorts of crap.
Yeah.
And the agencies or the platform itself would take a rap for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has self-moderated now. I think there's much because that lower end of the market has self-selected out onto SaaS.
Mm-hmm.
I think the standards have improved. I think there is not by all means across the board. There's still some shocking implementations out there, but that gives us hope, doesn't it? Because we still make some money, still get some work out of it. Yeah. But I think it is becoming more mature in that market, and there is a greater degree of quality and filtering out of that long tail rubbish.
Yeah, and it's not like we talk about the ebbs and flows of Magento. It's still the second biggest e-commerce platform in the world. It's not like it's really kind of holding its position well. And like you said, a lot of the migration to SaaS was at the lower part of the market. I mean, these were, I think, was it 90% or over 90% of merchants on Shopify are doing under $1 million a year?
Yeah. It's definitely a bell curve, and devil's in the detail.
Right.
So you don't subscribe to all those social posts about Magento being dead then?
Only the ironic ones. The ironic ones I love.
Yeah, I don't think the community's helping themselves by perpetuating that message, even if it is countering that message. It just creates this narrative.
It's great because the community is like very like self-reflective, and they're kind of like, they'll take criticism and be like, yeah, maybe you're right. Where it's so different with private corporate systems where there's some kind of mandated talking points, and this is the way we're going to discuss it, and this is our these are our PowerPoints, and you've got to like drive these PowerPoints through in all your messaging. Whereas the Magento, we're a bit of like a punching bag, but then we're also, that's part of the strength because we'll just take punches, and you're like, well, we're still here. So
you got to talk truth to power, and be open and honest with yourselves. But I think you're right. Most of the other platforms, aside from the two outliers being WooCommerce and Shopify, all the other platforms would give their right arm for the market share Magento.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, the value in that community, which you can't manufacture, you can't buy. It just exists, and it's tremendous value in that platform. I think, and for us as an organisation, we've been massively inspired by Hoover in terms of what they've done. And they've demonstrated that there is still that love. So we turned our attentions. We said, okay, well, how can we help put our money where our mouth is and solve some of the problems? I think, again, the community, we're very good at moaning about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Me as well. Actually, that doesn't do anybody any good. So actually, rather than just bitch about it, what can we do to solve these problems?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've put some effort and resource into solving a couple of the problems around total cost of ownership and time to market and checkout. And they're kind of, putting that out into the community to go that you can counter the hits that Magento take for patches and upgrades, or the time and effort it takes to spin up a site, or poor performing checkout. Here's a starting point for you, and you can then spend your time building great stuff rather than doing the bare bones or fixing.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. I think that merits another podcast right there.
Well,
what you just mentioned. So
there's a cliffhanger, Matt.
Yeah, that's right. Stay tuned for our next podcast. I will say this is might as well throw it out there. This is the first Magento Association podcast I've done. But when you said like let's time to roll up our sleeves and do work for the community. This is kind of what I'm contributing or trying to. And so I think that there's, the vibe I'm getting is that, the community's coming together. The belief in the platform is there. Huva really sparks a lot of life into it. So I'm happy to be part of the Magento Association and host some of these podcasts or be however, involved that I can. I think just to kind of summarize, I think what we're hoping to get out of these podcasts are stories about the ecosystem, the value of Magento, and what people are doing to contribute to this ecosystem, and some of the incredible work that people are doing. Let's not forget, there's incredible work that people are doing, and there's millions, there's thousands, at least hundreds of thousands of companies that are reaping the rewards of all this work and value. So I think that's kind of one of the key takeaways we should be getting from this podcast.
And I think the association is the vehicle to focus that.
Yeah.
That storytelling. I think for too long it's been rudderless. I'm hoping with this new leadership there will be a concerted effort to have some focus on that, because we need to hear those positive stories out in the market to counter the negative narrative that is all around us. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and take the high road and show the value and forget about the nonsense. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, hey Matt, this was great. Signing off, Magento Association Podcast, and then stay tuned, because Matt has some tools that they've built through his agency that he wants to share with you on our next podcast.
Stay tuned.
All right, stay tuned.